Hello, my name is Kindson Munonye, and in this presentation we are going to start our discussion on a new knowledge area, and that is project communications management. Previously on my project management courses, we rounded off with project human resource management, where we looked at the 4 different processes on the project human resource management knowledge area. And today we are going to be looking at the 3 processes in project communications management knowledge area, namely plant communications management, managed communications, and control communications. What is project communications management? Project communications management includes the processes that are required to ensure timely and appropriate planning, collection, creation, distribution, storage, retrieval, management, control, monitoring, and ultimate disposition of information or project information. And project managers spend most of their time communicating with team members and other project stakeholders, whether they are internal or external to the organization. In fact, effective communication builds a bridge between diverse stakeholders who may have different cultural and organizational background. Communication management is very important. In fact, one of the key attributes a project manager should possess is communication skills. Let me just give you this important quiz. It says approximately what percentage of the project manager's time is spent in some form of communication? A. 20%, B. 70%, C. 90%, and D. 45%. What do you think? That's it. C. 90%. Project managers spend or should spend 90% of their time communicating. Alright, let's now look at the processes under the communications management. There are 3 of them, and the first one is plant communications management, the one we are going to discuss in this very presentation, and that is the process of developing an appropriate approach and plan for project communications based on stakeholders' information needs and requirements and available organizational assets. Managed communications are the process of creating, collecting, distributing, storing, retrieving, and ultimate disposition of project information in accordance with the communications management plan. Control communications, the process of monitoring and controlling communications throughout the entire project life cycle to ensure the information needs of the project stakeholders are met. Alright. The communication activities involved in these processes may often have many potential dimensions that need to be considered, including internal within the project and external, customers, vendors, and other project organizations or the public. So we have internal and external communication, formal and informal. Formal means it applies to reports and briefings and minutes of meetings. Informal through emails, memos, and ad hoc discussions. Then we have vertical and horizontal. Vertical up and down the organization, from a higher hierarchy in the organizational chart to a lower one, and vice versa, and horizontal among peers, let's say among project managers or among project team members in the same level. Official and unofficial. When we talk of official, you think of something like newsletters that are circulated, annual reports, unofficial, off the record communication. Then we have written and oral, verbal and non-verbal. Alright, let's now look at a few communication skills that project managers should possess. One of them is actively listening and also effectively listening, questioning and probing ideas and situations to ensure better understanding, educating to increase teams' knowledge so that they can be more effective, fact-finding to identify or confirm information, setting and managing expectations, persuading a person a team or an organization to perform an action, motivating to provide encouragement or reassurance, coaching to improve performance and achieve desired result, negotiating. We discuss negotiation when we discuss the tools and techniques used to acquire project teams. So you need to negotiate either with functional managers or with other parties. Conflict resolution methods, we discuss this in manage a project team. We also have a summarizing, recapping and identifying the next steps. These are various communication skills a project manager should possess. So let's now go to the first process in the knowledge area, and that is planned communications management. Planned communications management is the process of developing an appropriate approach and plan for project communications based on stakeholders' information needs and requirements and available organizational assets. The key benefit of the planned communication management is that it identifies and documents the approach to communicate most effectively and efficiently with stakeholders. Now there are two terms that you need to be able to differentiate. One is efficient communication and we have effective communication. Effective communication is always highlighted as very important, and it means that the information provided should be 1. In the right format, 2. At the right time, 3. To the right audience, and 4. With the right impact. If a communication or information meets these 4 criteria, then we can describe it as effective communication. We also have efficient communication, means providing only the information that is needed. Let's also look at important considerations that may have to be taken into consideration. For instance, who needs what information and who is authorized to access that information, when, that is at the right time, where they will need this information, where the information shall be stored. We also have what format the information shall be stored in, how the information can be retrieved, and whether time zone, language barriers or cross-cultural considerations need to be taken into account. Alright, now on to the ITTOs of planned communications management. First input is project management plan, stakeholder register, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. The tools and techniques for planned communication include communication requirement analysis, communication models, communication technology, communication methods, and meetings. The output are 2, communication management plan and project documents updates. Let's now drill down to see why these inputs, tools and techniques and output are necessary. Of course, you know that the project management plan provides information on how the project will be executed, monitored and controlled, as well as closed. So we have project management plan as a necessary input to plan communications management. The next item is the stakeholder register. It provides the information needed to plan the communication with the project stakeholders. Of course, if you are communicating, you are passing information from yourself to someone and actually getting information from them. So who are these persons? They are likely documented in the stakeholder register, and of course we have some enterprise environmental factors that may affect the communications planning, and also organizational process assets. Alright, let's now take a closer look at the tools and techniques. The first one is communications requirements analysis. What is this all about? This is the analysis of the communications requirement, and this determines the information needs of the project stakeholders. Okay, so we are saying that communication analysis helps you determine the information needs of the stakeholders. These requirements are defined by combining the type and format of information needed with an analysis of the value of that information. project resources should be expended only on communicating information that contributes to the success of the project or where a lack of communication can lead to failure. Let's continue on communications requirement analysis. There's a little mathematics there, but never mind, it's not difficult. The number of potential communications channel under communication requirement analysis, the number of channels or paths is an indicator of the complexity of the project communication. So the total number of potential communication channels is given by this formula, n into n minus 1 over 2. So let's assume, okay, where n represents the number of stakeholders. So let's take, for instance, 3 stakeholders, 1, 2, 3. So number of communication pathways is just a minute. Let me change the color of this. Alright, let me use a different color to do this. So okay, let's use green. So now 1, 2, 3. So how many channels do you see? 1, 2, 3. So if n is 3, then we are expecting that the total number of channels will be 3. So let's put it in 3 into 3 minus 1 over what? Over 2. So that gives us equals 3 times 3 minus 1 is 2 over what? Over 2, and that gives us what? Equals 6 over 2 equals what? Equals 3. Okay, so meaning that if there are 3 stakeholders, we have 3. Again, let me just do a different test and let's see if it works. Let's assume 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say 4 stakeholders. How many communication channels are we going to have? Now we are going to draw the paths and then we do the calculation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what we are saying is that if we have 4 stakeholders, then we need how many channels? Well, of course, need 6 channels. So if we are going to calculate it, we have 4 into 4 minus 1 over 2. So if you do the maths, you see that it's going to give us 4 times 3 over 2, 12 over 2, 6. That justifies what we have here. So you need to memorize this formula. That is part of communications requirements analysis, a calculation of the number of channels for a given number of stakeholders. So as a result, a key component of planning the project's actual communication is to determine and limit who will communicate with whom and who will receive the information. So that planning is necessary because the more the number of stakeholders to pass information, the more complex the number of the communication is going to be. So it's better to simplify by reducing the number of channels, and this we do by deciding who and who deserve the information. Also of importance is sources of information typically used to identify and define project communication requirements, and they include organizational charts, project, organization, and stakeholder responsibility relationships, disciplines, departments, and specialties involved in the project, logistics of how many persons will be involved with the projects and at which locations, internal information needs, external information needs, stakeholder information, and communications requirements from within the stakeholder register. So these are the sources of information. The next tool and technique of importance in plant communication management is the communication technology. Communication technology follows the communications requirements analysis, and communication technology, for short, ICT is always very important in every organization. The methods used to transfer information among project stakeholders may vary significantly. For example, a project team may use techniques ranging from brief conversation to extended meetings, or from simple written documents to extensive materials which are accessible online as methods of communication. Some factors that can affect the choice of communication technology include urgency of the need for the information, availability of technology, ease of use, project environment, sensitivity and confidentiality of the information. So this can affect the choice of communication technology to use. Will it be a two-way radio? Will it be providing GSM cell phones for users? Will it be providing tablets for communication, email facilities? This has to be decided, and factors like these listed here needs to be taken into consideration. Another tool and technique used in plant communication management is communication models. Now, communication model is different from communication technology. It's also different from communication methods. Communication model used to facilitate communication and exchange of information vary from project to project. A basic communication model consists of two parties, defined as the sender and the receiver. Medium is the technology medium that includes the mode of communication, while noise includes any interference or barriers that might compromise the delivery of the message. So when we talk of communication models, take note of items like components like sender, receiver, medium, and noise. Alright, still on communication model, the sequence of steps in a basic communication model is: the first one is encode. That means that thoughts or ideas are translated or encoded into language by the sender. So it means that the sender originates the information, and before you are going to send it out, you need to encode it into a language that can be received by the receiver. Then we have now, after encoding, you transmit the message. Information is then sent by the sender using communication channel. The next is decode. This happens at the receiver's end. The message is translated by the receiver back into meaningful thoughts or ideas. Then at the receiver's end we have acknowledge. The receiver may signal acknowledge the receipt of the message, but this does not necessarily mean agreement with or comprehension of the message. So acknowledgement simply means, oh yes, I received it, I got it. Then the next one, finally, feedback or response. When the receiver message has been decoded and understood, the receiver encodes thoughts and ideas into a message and transmits this message to the original sender. So this is different from acknowledge. A feedback is a response. You've understood the message, and now you are giving a response based on the information contained therein. So these are the steps or sequence of steps in a communication model. Yes, this picture came from the Pinboard Guide 5th edition that shows us the steps or sequence in a communication model. We have encode, okay, transmit message, let's take it serial one after the other. This is the sender, this box represents the sender, this box represents the receiver. In between here is a medium of transmission or the channel. Alright, so the sender encodes, okay, and transmits message. There might be noise in between. The receiver decodes the message and acknowledges the message. After that, the receiver again encodes a feedback message and sends it right back to the sender. So that's about communication models. Let's now look at communication methods. There are three different communication methods described in the Pinbook Guide 5th edition. One of them is interactive push communication and pull communication. Let's look at this. Interactive is between two or more parties performing a multidirectional exchange of information. This is the most efficient way to ensure a common understanding by all participants on specified topics. Examples of interactive communication are meetings, phone calls, instant messaging or chats, and video conferencing. Then we also have push communication. This message is sent to specific recipients who needs to receive the information. Okay, this ensures that the information is distributed, but not ensure that it actually reached or was understood by the intended audience. Push communication includes letters, memos, reports, emails, faxes, voicemails, blogs, press release. So you can immediately see the contrast between interactive and push. Let's now look at the third communication method, and that is pull communication. This is used for very large volumes of information or for very large audiences. And requires the recipient to access the information content at their own discretion. These methods include intranet sites, e-learning, lesson length database, and knowledge repository. So just grab the information, store them there in the server or somewhere in a repository or database, and then anybody that wants can just go there, log in, and pull the information. So that's about communication methods. Let's now look at the two outputs of the plan communication management, and one of them is communication management plan. The second is project management plan update. Before I forget, take note that meetings is also one of the tools and techniques used for plan communication. The communication management plan is a component of the project management plan that describes how project communications will be planned, structured, monitored, and controlled. The communication management plan contains the stakeholder communication requirement, the reason for the distribution of that information, time frame and frequency for the distribution of required information, and receipt of acknowledgement or response if applicable, person responsible for communicating the information, and person responsible for authorizing the release of confidential information. And then finally, we have as an output of plan communication management the project document updates. And the project document updates might be project schedule and stakeholder register. Alright, this is how we wrap it up on the plan communication management under the project communication management knowledge area. I hope you've learned much from my presentation, and I'd like to please tell you to join me in my next presentation, as I'll be discussing the next process under the plan under the project communication management knowledge area, and that is manage communications. Manage communications. That is coming next.